So, hello, hello, hello. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Backyard Barbecue Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cool Breeze. Glad for everybody that decided to tune in. I appreciate your support. Appreciate all the good feedback you guys give me from week to week. Even the stuff that ain't all that good. Hey, I take it all in. Some of it I uh, work with, and some of it, hey, y'all could just keep it. But uh, I appreciate the support. Again, if this is your first time tuning in, I'm also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartMusic Radio, Amazon Music, and whatever other major podcast streaming services that you can think of. So, today with me, I have one of my good longtime friends of man, like literally childhood. Ethan, I'm gonna, allow him to introduce himself as I do every week, and he could tell you a little bit about himself.
All right, man. Appreciate that. First of all, let me say thank you for having me on. I appreciate this. And I
No
like what you're
doubt,
doing. I know I love what you're doing. This is great. So continue to keep doing it. So thank you for having me on here. Let me just say that first and foremost.
no doubt, no
Um,
doubt.
like like you said, we go way back, man. We probably known each other 30 plus years. You know what I'm saying? At this point, close to
Definitely,
40 probably. And
yeah.
yeah, grew up together, and both from Chicago, both from the South Side. So, we done seen a lot of ups and downs, and yeah, I'm born and raised on the South Side of Chicago, just like you. So, and now I currently reside in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So,
Hey, you know what's crazy? Uh, I because I drive, I used to drive through that area, and I never knew how to pronounce that until just
yeah,
so like just a little while ago. I used to be like Psyox, and people be like, "What?"
yeah,
And then finally, the one of the dispatch guys was like, "Man, this is just Sioux Falls, man." I'm like, "That don't look like that's supposed to be that." Like,
yeah.
so
It's
yeah.
it's funny that you say that because a lot of people call it Sioux-X. They'll call it
Mm,
Sioux-X. Sioux-X Falls is what a lot of people call it, but it's Sioux
yeah.
Falls, and Sioux is because it's the Indian tribal. So that's where the
Ah,
Sioux part of it comes from. The Sioux
okay.
Indian tribe. So that's where the Sioux part of it comes from. Yep.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was crazy. I just thought about that when you had said it. But yeah, me and this guy, man, we go back. I mean, to man, long history. I think I
Woo.
might have met Ethan. Our parents probably always knew each other before,
Yeah.
we actually started hanging out. But we was
Yep.
always in the same vicinity, growing up,
Yep.
at the Kingdom Hall with the Jehovah Witnesses.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's like when I say this is like fam, you know what I'm saying? It's one thing about growing up at the Kingdom Hall when your parents are Jehovah Witnesses is like you never really those people that you grew up with, they always family because it's almost
Yeah.
in a sense that those are the people that really understand you, no matter what
Yes.
comes about in life. Like when you experience, your parents passing
Hmm.
and having kids, especially if you had kids early, like most of us, like we
Yeah.
all understand each other without having to say anything because we all
Right.
was in the same boat. And if any of you all
Hmm.
out there that's, you know, Joe when it's kids, y'all know what I'm talking about. It's just
Hmm.
it's crazy. So um, we grew up as I remember at one point in time, people was thinking that we was cousins, and
Yeah.
we would
Yep.
go to the little conventions, and they'd be like, "Hey, like, where your cousin then?" And I was like, and I had
Yeah.
cousins that attended the hall, and I'm like, he right here. He like, no, the other one, the one that you look like. I'm like, man, we don't
yeah.
look
Yep.
alike, man. They be like, yes, y'all do, man. I mean, they swore we was cousins, like cousins or
Man.
brothers. And it was
I
crazy.
swear they did. I swear they did. I used to have people asking me the same thing, man. The same thing. Ain't y'all brothers? Ain't y'all brothers?
Man, Yeah,
Man.
just from another mother,
Yes, sir.
which unfortunately both of us in the same boat with that. We both lost our moms.
Hmm.
How long has it been for you now?
Woo, man. So it's September of 2013. So it's
Mm,
been going on
man,
what,
10 years.
9, 10 years? Be 10 years this
Yeah.
year. Yeah. Hmm.
Wow.
10 years, man. And it was
Yeah.
sooner. It was sooner than that for you. How long ago has it been for you?
This
Three,
year 6.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah. I heard you
man.
say 3. The time do go
Yeah,
by
yeah. That's what I
quick.
was thinking. Like, man, because I remember that's when we like talked on the phone. We was talking to
Yeah.
each other about that because you knew my mom had passed, and then we was talking about
Hmm.
the grieving process and all that, and that grieving process is always different for people whose parents was witnesses because of what their beliefs are and what our beliefs
Right.
may be, and then the people that surrounding that. So, like for me and you to be able to communicate that is a lot different than what some other people may communicate when they lose a parent. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's definitely it's just so much different, and
Hmm.
that's why I try to get people to a place where, you know, to me, in my personal opinion, religion was is probably the most biggest thing that divides people in general, because
Hmm.
whatever your belief is, if my belief isn't the same, it's kind of like we're already going to have a problem, and
Right.
we're having a problem that really don't even have to be a problem. It's just a problem
Right.
because we're in two different demographics, and it's it's a lot of unnecessary uh, kickback with people,
Yeah.
and it's really just all about the demographics, because
Right.
if you grew up in Dubai, you would be a Muslim, you know. Um,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
it's
For real.
last week I was talking, and we was touching on it. Me and Dion, one of my other guys, and we was just discussing, how that very thing is just demographics will tell what religion you in, and to a certain extent,
Hmm.
unfortunately, in our communities, in the black communities, it also brings about a stereotype of who you're going to be for the rest of your life as well.
Yeah. That's right.
So
That's right.
speaking of, like we both grew up on you know, the low end. Well, I wasn't
Hmm.
on low end for a long time, but my parents moved. But still, I was down there. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
every almost shoot 3, 4 times a week. You walking, knocking
Right.
on people's doors, and as a little Jehovah Witness kid, it's like you're taught the doctrine of the religion and the safety. Like, okay, we down here in the projects. Make sure you watch your back. Make sure you look down the
Hmm.
staircase before you go.
Yeah.
Somebody,
Yeah.
it was like rules. Like I remember as a kid, like when I was the only quote unquote man with the group, and it was just all women. I would have to go down the stairs and open the door so it would be light in the hallway, because they would bust out all the lights in the project hallways because they
Yep.
didn't really want us in
Yep.
them. So I would have to
Yep.
go down. I'm 8, 9 years old. I'm like, I'm nobody's man. Why I gotta go down there? And
Yeah.
uh, so growing up in that atmosphere, I know for the both of us, we both, you always feel growing up as a witness that it's so much that you're not experiencing, and
Hmm.
in a sense it is, and
Yeah.
in another sense it's not,
Right.
but I know for the most part, probably 80% of us, went to see actually what life was about,
Hmm.
and at times it landed some of us in trouble. I know, for myself it did. Um, I know you went through your little,
Yeah.
situations. Um, what
Yep.
made you get to the point where you was like, man, like I need to get up out of here,
Yeah. So for me, it was like this. And you'll probably be able to attest to this. Anytime you decide to take a step back from any of those doctrines and start to analyze them, not necessarily replace. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people think you got to replace religion with another religion. I'm beyond that. I'm talking about taking a step back and analyzing. And once you
Mm-hmm.
step back, you analyze those doctrines, and maybe something doesn't coincide, or just doesn't fit the way you feel like it should fit, and you decide to move in a different direction. You will usually have to figure out that direction because it's so different from everything else that you've been taught and structured to follow.
Right.
So for me, came a little bit of trouble, a little bit. I wanted to be in the streets for a little bit. I wanted to try to prove myself for a little while. I was raised in the projects in the Harold Icky homes, on the south side.
Right.
And so I wanted to get a little taste of that, see what that was like.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I figured out that the streets wasn't for me, then I had to figure out what was for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where some people get lost. They think, oh, because this wasn't for me, let me go back to what I knew before. They go back to the doctrines and all that stuff, and
Right.
let me seek acceptance over here. Which, hey, if that's what they want to do, more power to them. But that wasn't my route.
Right.
I need to figure out what was it that Ethan wanted to do, what was good for
Mm-hmm.
Ethan. And so it took me some trial and error to find that path. I was married, divorced, had 2 kids with my ex-wife. That didn't turn out, good, the marriage part of it. But as far as, having the children, that was still a blessing, a blessing for life, to have, beautiful, healthy
Right.
kids and stuff like that. And then it just took me a while to, like I said, figure out how I wanted to structure my life and what type of life I wanted to have.
Okay. So you had your kids before you moved to Sioux Falls?
No, I had them after I moved here. So I
Okay.
moved here when I was 20. I had my oldest daughter when I was 22, and then I had my youngest daughter when I was 25. So
Okay.
um I was married when I had my second, but we weren't married when we had the first.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. And in case y'all wondering why I don't know the answers to these questions, when you, like you said, when you growing up a Jehovah's Witness, and it's everybody is trying to figure themselves out, and so
Mm-hmm.
everybody winds up kind of like doing it all together because you're what 40? How old are you?
I just turned 43 in February.
Okay, so Ethan's 43, I'm 42. So we wasn't that far apart in age, along with the
Right.
rest of our peers. And when I say like the rest of our peers, like it's it's gigantic. Like you,
Mm-hmm.
we grew up with so many people, growing up at the Kingdom Hall, and then they would have these conventions, and you would meet other people, and your circle
Yep.
just became bigger and bigger. I mean, realistically, I would go to venture like we would walk around. Those of you from the
Man.
South Side of Chicago, when they Hawthorne Racetrack, they used to have the conventions around there, and we would walk around
Yeah.
Hawthorne Racetrack. Like, I mean, you would have thought we was a gang. I mean, it would be about 20,
Listen,
30 of us, and we would say to
man.
each other like, "Hey, we got to split up,"
Right.
and they'd be like, "You would have to pick who was, the cool
Yeah.
nigga that you wanted on your team, like, hey,
Yeah.
nah, you go with them, dog." So when
Yeah.
you grow up with all these people, and those are just people that were in our age group, but it
Mm-hmm.
still didn't negate the people that was like a couple of years older than us, and
Yep.
we still knew them. You know what I'm saying? And the older you got, of
Right.
course, you was able to conversate with them a little bit, because they saw you as the little shorties before. So
Right.
when we got older, everybody kind of began to disperse. Kind of, it was
Mm-hmm.
like when we were in our early teens, we would talk about it like, "Hey man, I can't wait till I do this, woo, woo, woo." And then as we started getting older, you would just kind of hear it like through word of mouth, like, "Hey, you know, E, shoot, hey, that nigga wild now. He went and did woo, woo, woo." You be like, "Straight up."
Yeah. Yep.
But
Yep.
at the time it don't really be dawning on you because you be already in the process of trying to do your own thing too. So,
Right.
y'all kind of slowly veer off, and then over the years, y'all you get 21, you see a couple of cats in the club, they be,
Yeah.
and it would always be tripped out because I've seen, um, some Jehovah Witnesses that I grew up with in the club, and they'd be trying
Hmm.
to hide, and I'd be like, hey man, you ain't gotta do all that.
Man.
Like we, I know you, like I grew up with you. We used
Yeah.
to we used to take baths together for real, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our parents went to high school together. This me.
Right.
This ain't. I don't
Right.
care what you do. I hope you're doing whatever it is to make you happy. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's really all about. Doing whatever it is to make you happy. People are so
Right.
much into a lifestyle of trying to make everybody else around them happy.
Hmm.
And I'm glad you made the point earlier saying, when you're and probably not just we're speaking because we grew up as Jehovah's Witnesses, but I imagine even in other religions, especially if your parents are really into it or they hold some type of position in the churches,
Hmm.
you under a lot of pressure and scrutiny, all the time to be, the perfect little, my father, he was an elder, still is after many years, got much respect for him, and we talk, but I was always, oh, little brother petite, little brother, and I'm like,
Yeah.
as you get
Yep.
older, you be like, hey man, you could just
Listen,
stop with that, bro. Like,
man, man.
so, um, uh, so when you got out there, in Sioux Falls, um, how was it? And I'm gonna ask you, how was it then coming out of marriage, and then what it's still like now if you are dating or are on the dating scene, like what
Okay.
was the transition like for you, um being divorced, and then if you got back out there, to start dating, and if you're still, in the realm of it or not.
So right now, I'm still single, and I mean I've done some what I call surface dating. Go out to dinner, go out to a movie, hang out with
Okay.
somebody. You know what I mean? But nothing serious. No living together. No nothing like that. For
Mm.
years, but um, when I was married, um, the biggest part of that was is in my mind I knew I never had like a father in the house like you did, first of all. So
Right.
me trying to create what I thought a man should do in marriage without anyone ever really teaching me was probably a
Hmm.
mistake. I probably should have
Mm.
seek some guidance from somebody else, even if it was somebody my own age, you know what I'm saying, that had
Right.
been married. I probably should have seeked that out instead of just getting into it and thinking that I knew what I was doing. Because the main reason that my marriage failed was because I wasn't attentive. I was still selfish, still wanted
Mm.
all my own stuff. I mean, you could provide for your family and still be selfish. Um, and then I just wasn't attentive either. Like I was more concerned about my own wants and needs than any of hers. Everything for her came second. So there's
Right.
no successful marriage that's gonna work like that. Anyway,
Yeah. True.
I learned that, so I'm not opposed to ever getting married again. I mean, it's not on my bucket list, but if I met the right woman and it came about, sure, I probably would do it again. Um,
Hmm.
and then as far as like the dating scene, the main reason that I haven't been too concerned with that is, my last kid just turned 18. She's about to
Mm.
graduate high school and stuff like that. So I'm more concerned with like all that stuff, getting her, off the launch pad and making sure she's good, just like my oldest. And then I can worry about the rest of my life after that, which I'm not saying that's always the right way to do things because tomorrow's not promised. And you could
Right.
short yourself something, or you could miss out on somebody great with that attitude. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't expect
Yeah.
nobody to sit around and wait for you either. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
that's pretty
kind of
much kind of how I did it.
a toss up, I guess, because in the same light, it's like you could see things different, and say, well, I'm going to get somebody to help me, raise them, and it could
Hmm.
turn out bad.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like a topsy turvy type of thing, kind of doing your best. We when you got kids, you just be trying to make the best decision for the now and what you know and what you hope is going to work out. You know,
Yeah,
um,
that's
sometimes
true,
you succeed and sometimes you
man.
fail at it, and but
Yeah,
it's just all a learning experience. Um, I know you don't something that we hate to hear or think about with our parents is like, man, they told me that that was gonna happen, or
hmm,
when you finally understand that phrase, you will find out when you got some kids, like
yeah, yeah.
my
And sure
father
enough, it
always used,
sure happens.
yeah, my dad used to always tell me that, like, you'll find out, you'll understand when you have some kids, and
Hmm.
now it's like I be telling my sons that, like, because especially my oldest, you know, it's a new generation. So, everything is, on you, Well, I was like this because you did, and be like, man, you, you know, I can't make you think for yourself. You had opportunities to, do what you wanted to do. Everything can't be on me. I don't have a problem with taking the fall when it's my fault, but everything can't be my fault, you know.
No,
And
and no, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I want to. This popped in my head, and because you just brought that up about how sometimes kids, do that, like it's your
Mm,
fault or whatever. But one thing that our kids had that we didn't have was everything that like you and I were taught as far as where our success should lie and what our future should be about was
mm-hmm.
strictly around religious beliefs. There was no be the best you can be, do the best you can do, explore your avenues of greatness, see where your greatest abilities lie, unless it
Yep.
has something to do with religion.
Yep.
All your structures of the future were around religion. Whereas for our kids, they have no idea how many options we've allowed them to have and to be
Yeah.
able to express themselves and to make their own choices
Yeah.
within reason. Obviously, you still got to have structure and discipline there for them, but within reason, there we've allowed our children
Mm,
to have way more freedom of expression than we were ever allowed to have. You know what I'm saying? Like I couldn't even hardly dress myself, you know what I'm
man.
saying, how I wanted to dress. You know what I'm saying? If and I ain't talking about dressing crazy. I'm just saying,
Mm,
if my mama felt it didn't fit or it looked a little too whatever, I couldn't wear it.
mm,
Whereas for
yeah.
my kids, they got all sorts of options.
Hmm.
So
And yeah, I think about that a lot because, like you said, uh, I had my dad in the house, but my father
hmm
also held one of the higher positions, within
hmm
that organization, and so it was
yeah,
always like all eyes on those kids like that because it was you know uh, he was one of the ones that was considered the example to follow, and
yeah,
so it was um, I don't even think that the my parents even realized the type of pressure that
mm-mm.
was on me as a child because they didn't grow up Jehovah Witnesses,
Hmm.
So my parents became Jehovah Witnesses after they were grown, and
My mother
so
did too. So did
yeah,
my mom. Hmm.
yeah. So y'all had already celebrated the Christmas and went out and kicked
I
it
was
and all that.
I was gonna say that my mom that smoked weed. She was a Black Panther. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, she done
I didn't
had
know that, but
Christmas,
I could see your
Easter.
mama being a Black Panther.
Listen, she really was. I ain't making that up. She was a Black Panther. You know what I'm
Man, I could
saying?
see
Listen,
her
she
like that.
smoked. Yeah, she smoked weed before. She done had Christmases, Easters, Thanksgivings. You know what I'm saying? Probably some
Yeah.
4th of July action in between there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So
all the birthdays, you done had all the birthday parties. You know
exactly.
what I mean? Yeah, yeah.
And see,
Hmm.
I think it used to kind of affect my mom a little bit because I remember, and I think a lot of Jehovah's Witness kids probably went through this. Like I remember on Halloween,
Oh
my mama
man.
used to take me to the store and like get like a little bucket of put a whole bunch of candy in it, but I couldn't eat it until the day after Halloween.
Yeah.
It was like like
Yeah.
this not Halloween
Yeah.
candy. I'm just getting you some candy, okay? And
Yeah.
I'd be like,
Yeah.
all right then, whatever. Then
Hmm.
even with the
Yep.
holidays, again, because they grew up celebrating the holidays. So even on the holidays like Thanksgiving, we would have Thanksgiving the day after Thanksgiving. My mama would buy me presents the day after Christmas. Like, you know,
Yep.
and
We got unwrapped presents, me and my sister. So like we didn't get it from my
mm,
mom, but like my granddad would get us stuff, or he'd give us an
yeah.
envelope with some money, and we couldn't open it till the 26th.
Right.
But it's like you already knew it was in. It was in a Christmas envelope. The envelope was red.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like still
And
Christmas money.
so yeah, so it was like, the pressures of just, even with the peer pressure. I remember um like having so many questions, and in my opinion, a lot of people I was covering this last week about things that we have been conditioned to think and
Hmm.
based on the things that we've been taught. And I can't speak for any other religion, just the one that I know the most about, which is the witnesses. Um,
Right. Same here.
yeah, I believe that you became conditioned so much on different teachings, and some stuff never made sense to me as a child. And I would ask questions about it. It was like, oh, don't you ask, no questions about that. It's
Yeah.
just
Yep.
let Jehovah, and you'd be like, but this just don't
Hmm.
make no sense, man. And so
Right.
when you send a child that's impersonable at that age growing up, and you don't have consistent answers that are valid,
Hmm.
you leave them in a bad place. Because now
Yep.
you want me as a child to go to school and stand
Hmm.
up for something that I don't even know what I'm believing in. You know,
Yep.
and for them, they never understood the fact that we felt like that because again, they wasn't raised being Jehovah Witnesses, and so
Right.
they jumped in and then they gave them these. And one thing about they might have gotten better over the years, but back in the when we was growing up in the 80s and 90s, you couldn't ask your parents a lot of questions about a lot of things, especially if it had to do with sex. It was like,
Oh man, it was just off
they
limits.
yeah, they came with this book, this little blue book, young
But
people
young
ask
people ask questions that work.
answers that work. Yeah. And they was like,
Yeah.
these are the questions that most young people have, and I remember I used to ask my dad stuff. Well, if you look it up in the young people ask book, I'm like, no, man, that for one, tell you one thing, for them to not have, um, for them to be a religion that always talked about how equal the organization was. In those books, it wasn't a lot of black people in them books.
Mm-mm.
There's a
Nope.
lot of white people in them books, in the picture
Hmm.
illustrations. And the questions that were in those books, I felt like wasn't even black people questions. Those were
Right.
we had other questions that was, you know,
Hmm.
them that little simple stuff that they had in there. We already knew the answer to that. We had talked among ourselves and found out the answers to that. But
Yep.
our real questions, they didn't. I can't even go with the fact that to say that they didn't know how to answer it because they
No.
knew the answers to them because they had been
Yeah.
out in the world already.
Yep.
They didn't know how to answer it according to the organization, and
Yeah.
so
And we all know that
th-
urban lifestyle and American dream lifestyle are different. So what I
Yeah.
mean by that, and I'm gonna break this down for people that's listening. I'm not breaking this down for you because you already know
Mm,
this. You know this from growing up in Chicago.
mm,
Suburban lifestyle, inner city lifestyle. Two different lifestyles, two different
mm.
sets of goals, two
Yeah.
different mindsets, two different daily operational activity sets. One person
Mm,
is worried about getting shot, robbed, mugged. The other person is worried about the stock market, black or white. You understand what I'm saying? Just
mm.
because it's different. One person is worried about food on the table for the night and catching a bus on time so they don't lose their job. And the other person is upset with some financial institution and a family member and going out to buy dinner without even checking the balance on their debit or credit card when they swipe it. You understand
Exactly.
what I'm saying? It's two
Mm,
different lifestyles. So now I said all that to I'm gonna bring it back in the book. Most of that was geared towards non-urban type problems
exactly.
and lifestyles, and then they would take this information out and share it with people and just share them all these beautiful things and say you could have this, life could be like this, da, 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 da.
Right.
And it
Mm-hmm.
looks great. It looks great on paper. Everything looks great on paper in life.
Yeah.
Any kind of business structure, when someone's trying to sell it to you, looks great on paper.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But it was kind of like that. And so some
Yeah.
of those
Cause
questions never got addressed. Never
yeah.
they never even came to the table. Forget about getting addressed. They never even made it to the
Right.
table. It was crossed off the docket before I ever got there. You know?
Mm-hmm. Cause I'll throw in something else for those of you who don't know about it. It's the equivalency of having a very detailed instruction book for a cabinet, and you know it's detailed because it got a lot of pages in it. It's just not in English.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's how we felt with those publications that they was giving us. Like this
Yep.
this look good, but ain't none of this stuff going on in the hood where we at. You know, like we
Right.
need to know
Right.
about. I got questions as to, am I about to get in trouble when they start shooting, and or if I got to beat somebody up, you know, because they done put their hands on me about this religion. You know, like
Right.
I got questions
Mm-hmm.
like that. That stuff
Yeah.
ain't happening in the neighborhoods where y'all wrote this book for the people that's there. Like
Yep.
it's just not relevant. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, it was, you know, I think it's safe to say they lost a bunch of us,
Yeah.
and translation, so to speak, after the years, came about because just nobody wanted to, I don't think it made sense to any of us, and I don't even think it made sense to them. But see, one thing about like you said about the demographics is that you're able to sell and the same thing goes for just regular churches. You have
Mm-hmm.
um in urban areas, you have a lot of two things: churches and liquor stores.
Yeah.
And you can go on every other block, especially like where we grew up at. You could go down Michigan, Indiana, from
Yes, sir.
35th to
Yes, sir.
51st. And I don't care what block you go on from east to west, you'll be able to find a liquor store and you'll be able to find a
Absolutely.
church, you know.
Yes, sir.
And those are things that have always been abundant in every um, urban, low economic neighborhoods.
You know
But
why?
like, yeah, that's what I was about to get to.
No,
Now,
go tell me. Tell me. Tell me.
yeah, the reason, my reason, and why is because you have you have churches. Religion is set up to give hope. And see, when
Yes,
you stay in
sir.
the urban area where people are deprived of things
Yep.
and they don't have things. See, we were most even the Jehovah Witness Kingdom halls are set up just like churches. They're all in a lot of low budget areas because
Mm-hmm.
see, I could come to your door if you stay in the projects and knock on the door. Excuse me, like have you ever wondered about living, in a place where you can have your own home but see, you
Mm-hmm.
can't go out to Carroll Stream and knock on
Yeah.
somebody's door where they already own 10 acres of land.
Yep.
And you're talking about peace and security. They got their own
Yeah.
security out here. You know,
Right.
they're not wanted for anything. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you said animals. We got a couple of horses over there. You want to
Yep.
bring your little one over here, and you will feel
Mm-hmm.
stupid and embarrassed going over there with that type of message because these people have seceded already. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's us that was down there, on the low end, knocking and trying to sell a dream to somebody just because of the area that we stayed in. And
Right.
in churches, it's more. Um, I think probably just the biggest thing between growing up at the Kingdom Hall and church was that just church. Um, they asking you for money. At the
Mm-hmm.
hall, it was kind of a voluntary thing, but they still in turn asking for it. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
they got a unique way of asking for it. You know, oh,
Yeah.
and don't forget your voluntary donations on the way out. You know,
Right. Got to keep the lights on. The other thing that's different too is, with the churches too, you seek them out. So like you go there,
mm,
seek them out, and then they will study the word with you. Whereas like Jehovah's Witness structure is for them to go seek people
go
out to
find you.
bring them to
Yeah.
bring them in. Yep, to
Hmm.
study it with them. And then as far as what you was talking about, the liquor stores, the churches, Kingdom halls, stuff like that in these low income areas, I was on the same page as you where you were some it's faith and hope.
Hmm.
If you can give people something to hope for, you will in turn have them build faith upon it. Because faith is just a mindset and a heart condition.
Hmm.
Faith is not
Exactly.
anything that's guaranteed. It's a
Hmm.
mindset and a heart condition. That's all faith is. There's no guarantee when it comes to the word faith and what faith is. It's just where somebody decides to put their energy and their beliefs. So basically, you can sell faith as a band aid to a person who can't afford a surgery.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, look, I know you can't afford the surgery, but here's a band aid that'll make it better until you can afford the surgery. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and you see that a lot in these, poorer, low income neighborhoods or people who have gone through something. Maybe they do have money, maybe things are great, but they have gone through some kind of heartache, pain, sorrow, lost a kid to cancer, lost a spouse they love or something. Now they're looking for some type of hope, faith, or something to help them with that pain that they're going through and give them something to continue to look forward to and believe in life.
Hmm. And see, that's why I don't use certain words. So last week, in my discussion, I was talking about I call it the H word because I rarely like to even speak of it, but the word humble.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel like I got to give a little bit at a time because people jump on you. You get a little too deep too fast. So I try to give it a doses to let it marinate a little bit. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's not about making you all believe what I believe. It's just for you to think about and open your mind to something other than what you have been conditioned to think. And so when
Yeah.
I think about, that word humble, it goes back to a specific group of people for me, which is us. You
Mm-hmm.
have to think that back in when we were coming out of slavery,
Mm-hmm.
they already didn't want us to be free people again anyway.
Right.
And they tried to make sure that we didn't get too big headed, that we didn't think too much of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So thus came the word humble. We gonna let you go, little nigger, but don't you get too
Right.
big headed.
You got to keep
Hum
what's the word they use in the book? Humility. Make sure you keep
Yeah,
some humility. You need to have humility. Yeah.
because see, you only and I want y'all to just think about this. Like, don't shoot me down in my inbox about this conversation, but I really just want to open the eyes of people sometimes to just think a little bit outside your box and what you know.
Mhm.
When you think about the words humble, when are they most applied? They're mostly applied to situations where somebody has uh, received a type of achievement, or they have elevated to a certain point. They have made a purchase that's out of the ordinary. You know, when you somebody graduates from college and they be like, oh
Yep.
man, I done made it, I done came,
Mhm.
like I used to was in the hood, man. And they got a different walk about themselves. And then somebody say,
Mhm.
come along and they say, hey, humble yourself now, be humble.
Yeah.
In
Yep.
turn, if you really think about it, again, y'all don't beat me up, but it's the equivalency of saying, hey, after they say, man, I'm feeling good about myself, and they walking that walk, which they should.
Yep.
Hey, sit your ass down, little nigga boy.
Yeah.
Don't put your shoulders back down. You
Mhm.
know, and when you say that to me, to humble yourself, I shouldn't, and I'm not me. I'm not going to make you feel better because maybe you haven't been doing anything with your life.
Right.
Because humble also in a group of people also says, I don't want you don't be trying to shine around everybody because you're gonna make them feel bad. Maybe
That's
we need
right.
to start making people feel bad so they get up and get off the Section 8 so they can get
I
off and
was.
stop having these kids, knowing that they can't take care of them so that they can stop quitting these jobs that you can't afford to because you got 3, 4 kids at home. Maybe I don't need to be humble so they do feel uncomfortable. We've been
Mhm.
making people feel comfortable for way too long.
Right.
Like comfort is a problem. I just found
Mhm.
out not too long ago that if your parent got Section 8 and that parent died, that you can inherit the Section 8.
I didn't know that. I did not know that. And what's crazy is I grew up on Section 8, and I
Yeah,
did not know. I did
you
not
can
know that.
inherit. It's people out here fighting about Section 8 when Big Mama died.
Listen, man, stop it.
Man,
No,
if you're talking about
that's a
reverse
trap,
race,
bro.
yes,
That's a trap. To want to stay in that is a trap.
man.
Trap, man.
You talk. You can't get no worse than reverse racism on that level. You They
Mhm.
don't even see, they put things in our way, and that's why I want people to be thinking. That's why I embodied this podcast, because I really just want people to start thinking outside the box. They put that in there because, for one, Section 8 should be something to get you on your feet. Why is
Yep.
people even having, unless you're an older individual, or you're an individual that really can't take care of yourself. Why
Hmm.
why is somebody that's 23, able bodied, got Section 8 anyway?
Hmm.
And if you do need it, you shouldn't have it 5 year max. And I say 5 years because it takes 4 years to get a degree, and I'll give you one more to figure the situation out. By then,
Right.
you should be straight.
Yeah.
But they don't even try to kick you off of it. Why?
Because it's a
Because they
trap.
want you, yeah, they want you there. That's the way to keep you humble.
Yep.
Humbleness says, I'm not even going to go and try to get myself an education. I'm not even going to try to go get a better job because then
Hmm.
they're going to make me pay real rent. So I'm going
Man,
to
you
humble
ain't
myself
lying.
and
You ain't
stay in
lying.
the same position humbly,
Hmm.
and make these few dollars and let them pay my rent, and I'll pay $40 to my landlord humbly.
Right.
Like, you really got to be thinking about where we came from. The release of black people out of slavery wasn't to help us succeed.
Hmm.
And if you forever think in your mind that these words that you say out your mouth and the way that you're thinking doesn't have any correlation to the life that you're living now, you crazy. you
Hmm.
know Crazy, because everything that, it's like you have to be unlearned in a sense,
Yep.
because it's like with us, like I've never taught my kids religion. You know,
Right.
I taught them the Ten Commandments,
Hmm.
and I said I feel like that this will keep you out of trouble. Which
Hmm.
I believe that to this day. Like those are 10 things that'll keep you out of any situation that you could think of.
Hmm.
So, and the reason I didn't was because after I left the hall, I did try to attend church, but it was
Hmm.
difficult for me because I couldn't unlearn what I had learned at the hall in order for me to be able to take in what they were telling me. And so it was like
Right.
a internal fight. And
Hmm.
so I said, I'm not going to teach my kids religion, because if they decide to go into anybody's religion, they can go into it with a clear mind, because
Right.
I
Doing their
haven't
own research. Yeah.
exactly, because I haven't tainted their minds. So when we
Hmm.
think, again, we're not that far off from slavery, people. We are really
Right.
not that far off, just a few generations. So
Yeah.
when you think
That's it.
about all of the stuff that we were taught and conditioned to think, and how we still think, from things that we're just now learning. Like last week
Hmm.
I mentioned the mortgage situation. Yeah, they taught us that we could go get a house, but they didn't teach us what to get. They told us to go buy yourself a house so you could pay us for this house for 30 years. And if you miss a couple
Yep.
payments along the way, we don't care if it's in the 29th year, we'll come and get that house that your big mama then paid 67,000 of the 70,000 that she owned, and
Yep.
we'll take it and then resell it for
Hmm.
70,000 more. They didn't
And
tell
start
us when
over.
you,
Yep. With somebody
yeah,
else. Yep.
they didn't tell us that the interest rate was going to be so great on it, if you didn't have your credit together, because you didn't know, your parents didn't know, while you was growing up, to put you on their credit as an authorized user. So now when you
Hmm.
go buy your first house, you won't have enough credit, because you don't have a credit file, and you started out bad when you went to college, when they gave you these cards and you thought that they was giving you something. Because see, they give certain people cards.
Yeah.
You're 18 years old. They give you a card based on some certain demographic factors.
Yep.
They know you can't pay. You in college, you don't have a job. They know you can't pay. So yeah, hey, what y'all? How many
Hmm.
black students you got? Give all three of them, 300 of them, credit cards. We'll take
Yep.
the $15,000 loss. But we
Hmm.
won't have to worry about them applying for anything.
Yep. They're
So
gonna be stuck. They're gonna be in a
yeah,
never-ending spiral, stuck in a,
yep.
revolving door. That's what I was thinking about. They're gonna be stuck in a revolving door.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
then you go and you go get you a house, and see they gave us, uh, it's a little bit of lie in every truth. My mama used to always tell me a little bit of truth in every lie. I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
so
She's wise. She's wise.
yeah, and so yeah, they told us that we could go and get a mortgage to get a property, but what they didn't tell us is that we should get a multi-unit family house first, so that could pay off the house. Because what else they
Hmm.
didn't tell us is that at the end of you paying for every house that you buy, people, I don't care what type of finance rate you got, for every house that you buy, the bank got two. So you got one, they got two, because you're paying a 30-year mortgage with whatever percentage. You best to
Hmm.
believe they getting two out the deal.
Yep.
Especially if you got an adjustable rate, they might get three up
Right.
at you. So now
Man.
that you then mess that up, you know, then you go to the bank, try to get a loan for a business, because now we just figuring out we needed to have been running our own business. Now what they will give you is a credit card, but you try to get a loan.
Hmm.
Try to get a loan to start your business. Oh no, no, no. But we'll give you this $10,000 card, to help you out. And we be thinking we winning because we got the credit card. No, you winning when they giving you their money. See, you got to
Right.
think. They're giving you their money for you to invest. But why would they give you
Hmm.
their money to invest in you as a black person, knowing that that's going to help you elevate? No, 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 no,
Hmm.
no. We need to keep you right along in the range of the, uh, not in the Section 8 section, but just to the left of it, you know. So where
Yep.
you fall, you can fall right back down there, you know.
Hmm.
So is our thinking on a lot of different things is just gotta man, it's gotta change, you know. That's why I be trying to
It
have these
does.
just transparent conversations. I know some of y'all probably get mad at me on some of the topics, especially about religion, but man, you just gotta dig deep, into this thing and find out, you know, uh, why you believe the stuff that you believe, with
Right.
anything, religion, the child rearing, you know,
Hmm.
where you working at, how you talk to your kids, your husband, wife, all of this has some roots. And you gotta go back, like they used to say, we gotta go back to Africa, find out where we're from. You
Man.
in a sense you do, you know,
Right.
because life wasn't what we think it is right now,
Hmm.
and we had the opportunity to change some things for the generations to come, but we can't speak on generational wealth, without being knowledgeable on what your ancestors had, how they was living, and why
Hmm.
you living the way you living right now, you know.
Right.
So,
And
it's just
we'd be so caught up with the shine too, because we didn't have much. Most of us didn't have much, so we'd be so
mm-hmm,
caught up with the shine. Everybody wants to shine.
mm-hmm,
Everybody wants to look like they made it, whether they have or haven't. You know what I mean? If they have made it, a lot of us want to look like we made it. If we haven't made it, a lot of us still want to look like we made it. We so caught up with the
yeah,
shine. We so caught up with there are so many things that have our minds entrapped in this world that really don't mean anything.
and that's the
And
social
I'm
media
not
part.
saying I was gonna say I'm not above saying that I'm above any of that. I have to check myself sometimes because there are things that have me entrapped. You know what I'm saying? I have to
Mm-hmm.
really have a conversation with myself and realize do I really want this? Do I really need this? Should I really have this? Why do I really want this? What is my thought process behind this? Why am I so obsessed with this item or whatever it may be?
Right.
Sometimes I have to dig real deep and try to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely necessary because social media, it
It's a
it takes
drug.
you to a whole nother place. Yeah. And none of these people. See, I'm a background watcher. So when I be
Hmm.
seeing people, and they be, you know, in their little fancy clothes, but I see the background is closed in the back. I've always known what the projects look like, and uh,
Hmm.
some people, their background just look a little bit better than the projects, but it's still the same. And it ain't,
Yeah.
and if that's your living situation at the time, that's cool, that's fine. Guess what? If you stay in the projects, you're not staying on the street. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I'm not, by all means, I'm not knocking anybody in their living
Hmm.
conditions. But if that is your situation, you don't need to be on social media trying to front like you making it. You need to be somewhere trying to make it. And that's the reason that currently um the US is trying to ban TikTok because
Hmm.
TikTok is different in China than it is in the United States.
I
The
seen that.
argument, yeah, the argument is that they have things that are for the uplifting on TikTok in China, and in TikTok in the
Hmm.
United States, they pump up the bullshit in a sense.
Right.
What
Hmm.
all the fights, all the killings, the algorithm soaks all that up and dishes it out whether you subscribe to it or not. Which
Right.
made it different from Facebook because Facebook algorithm works off of what you've looked up the most. So you get to talking about
Hmm.
flying a helicopter tomorrow, then hey, you'll see more of that stuff. I don't get
Right.
stuff like the fights, neighborhood fights, and shootings and stuff like that on
Yeah.
Facebook because I don't be looking for that type of stuff. But
Same.
TikTok don't care. They gonna give it to you
Oh,
whether you want it or not.
yeah. And another thing about TikTok too is it's also looking to entertain you, right? But sometimes that
hmm
entertaining is to take away your time. So,
hmm
like you said, maybe it's not even the fights and stuff that's coming up, but if it's not educational and it's simply entertainment and it's adding no type of value or growth to your life, future, or current situation, you got to think about that too. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Because it's still time being wasted, even if it is entertaining. The time is
Yeah.
still being wasted that you can't get back.
Facts. Facts. So, man, I ain't gonna hold y'all too long. You know, sometimes good conversation just be flowing and the time go by before you know it. But
Man, yeah,
I'm gonna have my boy back on here, you know, in the near future, you know. Hopefully he'll, you know, bless us with his presence again. You know, we talk about it's one thing. Me and him, we could talk about anything, you know, and you
yes,
know,
sir.
dive into that thing, you know. So
Yep.
appreciate you for coming out, man. And I want to say, you know, to you while you here, you know, because we gotta give flowers before, you know, before they hit the dirt. You know, me knowing, you know, where you come from, you know, uh and who you are. You know, I'm proud of you, man. You know, I'm proud that you out there, you doing your thing, and you know, taking care of yourself, taking care of your kids, you know, providing those girls, you know, something different than what you had seen, you know, in terms of having a father around, you know.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
Hats off to that, man. Kudos. I'm proud of you. You know, I always got much love for you.
Well, hey man, I appreciate that. And let me say the same thing back to you and give you your flowers while you're here too. You know, I'm proud of the podcast you're doing, but just everything. You know, I know where you came from, same place I came from, and also what you've been through, the ups and downs, you know, some really big, and you never let those things hold you back. You never worried about what people may think about it or anything like that. And you've always continued to do you. And that's why you always rise and come back above no matter what. So kudos to that, man. Just know I got much love for you. You know what I mean? And I love to see what you're doing, you know, here and just in life in general. You know, you treat your wife right, you take care of the kids, you treat people fair, you know what I mean? And you live life to the fullest instead of just being smashed inside of a box worrying about how other people are going to look at how you decide to live life. So I have to give you flowers for that, man, and props. And I ain't got no hat on, but if I did, it'd be hats off. So I got to salute you for
Hey,
sure.
hey, I appreciate you, man. You know, appreciate you. Well, y'all, you know, this will wrap up another episode, you know, and I will see you all next week, and we'll chop it up again. Peace
All right.
out.